Hello, race fans. My name is Taylor, and welcome back to Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk all about the NASCAR Cup Series. And guys, it's championship weekend. We got a lot to talk about, breaking down a lot from Martinsville, a lot of kind of frustrations, I would say. And then we're going to jump into updates and hot takes, talking about some silly season news, also talking about the TV schedule that was just released for the Cup Series, and finally jump into our preview of the championship weekend. But I'm not doing it alone. Up for the second time on the show is Brandon Loe. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. Always good to be here. I know after the first show, we talked about when I would be back on. So thanks for having me back on again 2 weeks later, and a big one going into the season finale.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for being back. Love having you on the show. Obviously, off season coming up. We'll have to figure something out. But are you ready to break down the Xfinity 500? A lot to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about. And it feels like every year when we go to Martinsville, we can say after every single Martinsville race that we had a lot to decompress or talk about.
I think decompression is the right word because there was a lot of tempers. But with your results, though, who would have thought that the last race before the championship race, we would have a non-playoff driver winning, especially with the round of 8 being filled with such heavy hitters for Martinsville. Alex Bowman ended up taking the cake, winning the race. This makes his 4th victory of the season. And he also clinched the manufacturer title for Chevy this year. So congratulations to Chevrolet. No surprise to me. But let's look at the rest of your top 10 for the Xfinity 500. We have Kyle Busch in second, Ben Keselowski, Truex, Byron, Almirola, Kurt Busch, Eric Jones, and Chris Buescher making it into the top 10. Pretty great. And then Joey Logano. Now, looking at your other playoff drivers, though, to finish outside the top 10, we have Ryan Blaney finished in 11th. Brandon, he struggled. I mean, Dylan got into Blaney in the race once or twice. I think it was only once. I might be exaggerating, but then the air gun broke on pit road. He had a few more issues, and everything that really could go wrong for that 12 team did. How disappointed were you?
It was not a good day for me.
No.
I was when I was on here 2 weeks ago, I picked Ryan Blaney to win Kansas. Did not go well. It seems like me picking him was his downfall. So maybe I need to rethink my championship pick before we get there, because I don't want that to happen again. But no, he struggled, and it was an uphill battle. And when you look at the day that he had to take an 11th place finish at the end of the day, it's a good finish. It's a solid finish, obviously well away from what he needed. I mean, by the end of the race, needing a win or something major to happen, almost got it. You thought for sure there at the end that if there was 1 or 2 more restarts that he could have needled his way back in there and potentially won or got in on points. But just not a good 2 weeks for him. And it's disappointing because if you go back and listen to the radioactive from Martinsville, he's talking to Roger Penske before, like, hey, we're going to try to get this done for you. And you look at all 3 of the Penske drivers out.
It was not the year for Penske we thought. Obviously, starting the playoff rounds, when I had the other crew members from Above the Yellow Line on the show talking about our brackets, we said there's a formula to the championship 4. We had 200 guys, 1 Joe Gibbs, 1 Penske. That's not the case. We'll get into that, but let's look at the rest of the playoff drivers for a moment. Kyle Larson finished 14th, and this is most likely due to 2 speeding penalties on pit road. Didn't set him back. Luckily, he was already locked in. So nothing to worry about. Very far ahead in points. Obviously, now the points really don't matter because they're all reset to the same. But then we go to Chase Elliott finishing 16th. Now, he won both stages, and he clinched the playoff spot in the championship 4. After the second stage, he was pretty much guaranteed if he didn't mess up. Then Brad Keselowski spun him out in the last remaining laps of the race, and I don't blame Brad. I mean, he was racing for a win there to get himself into the championship 4, like we said. Unfortunately, did not make it into the championship 4. But I don't blame him, so I'm not mad at Brad Keselowski, really not. And then finally, Denny Hamlin. We're going to talk about Denny Hamlin. Don't worry, we're getting to that. You all know what's coming, but he finished in 24th position. Now looking at the Above the Yellow Line crew points, they're kind of set in stone at this point. There's still some wiggle room for somebody to take over, probably like 4th and 3rd place, or I guess move to 4th place. But Adam has 42 points, Dom has 53 points, myself has 39 points, and Zach has 47 points. So I'm a little bit of a shoo-in for last place, but things could change. You never know. And then finally, with our bracket points going into the championship round, we're all pretty close in points. I got to change how I do the points next season, but Adam has 27, Dom has 25, I have 26, and Zach has 23. And like Brandon and I just discussed, we now have our championship 4 going back to how things kind of shook out at Martinsville. We have obviously Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, and Martin Truex Jr. Not somebody I absolutely I didn't expect whatsoever. So first off, how shocked are we with the championship 4? Obviously, I think half of it was expected, but with Truex, were you surprised, Brandon?
I think that was the one for me that if you had to look and say, who are you surprised that's there? I mean, it has to be Truex. You look back and Chase Elliott for me is an automatic just coming off the championship. You have to assume that he's going to make it back as I think you do with any champion. Assume they're going to make it back to that point. Larson was my pick. We talked about that 2 weeks ago. Denny Hamlin always puts together a really good season. Even if it wasn't what we would have expected this year, I would say he was like underwhelming in a sense, but he also like is really good at just being consistent and getting the job done. But Truex for me, he was a guy that really did have an off year. And you look back to a couple of years ago when he had this dominant Kyle Larson 2021-esque season where he won all the races. He went on to win the championship. And it seems to me like that was a little deceiving because we haven't really seen that from him since. He's had strong cars, he's had strong runs, he's gotten wins. But if you look at the 4, you could definitely say that he's the one that is the most surprising. Like, oh, hey, you're here.
And I think too, though, what is so deceiving about this playoff format is, yes, you have 3 races in a round, the slate is wiped clean, then you move on to the next. So it really depends on the tracks that are in that round and the driver. And I think this last round really benefits Martin Truex Jr. So yes, I'm surprised. Obviously, I've mentioned before in the show, I had him out after the round of 12 being a shock guy that, is just out early that you wouldn't expect, but I did not expect him to make it all the way to the championship 4. But the last round really did benefit him. So those are your championship 4. I think on this topic now, let's talk about Team Penske. We talked about it just a little bit now, but let's go into more depth, at least with Brad Keselowski. Now, this is his last year, in my opinion, to really make a run for the championship. He's moving to, I hate using the word like worse equipment or lesser equipment, but he's not going to be in Penske tier equipment anymore. And like I said, he's gone from Team Penske. This actually today, as we're recording Wednesday, he posted a video. Basically, this was his last day in the Penske shop. I did not cry. I did not cry. I wanted to. I was really emotional. 12 years. How do you compare those 12 years to what's coming up next?
I mean, I think it's just he's at the point in his career where he's ready for something new. He's ready for a different adventure. We've seen it with other drivers. We've seen it with other drivers where they've taken sort of a step back, I guess you could say. But for him, he's moving into that part owner role. And you see that with a lot of guys now. I mean, Jeff Gordon obviously retired many years ago now. Wow, that's scary to say. But he's moving into an upper tier role at Hendrick Motorsports. You have Denny Hamlin, who now owns 23XI. You have all these drivers that are getting later in their careers. And I think Jeff Gordon could really still be racing if he wanted to. He's not that old to me. But being that he retired so long ago, that is weird to say. You just see these drivers that are getting more on the back part of their career and they want to move into something else. They want to take on a different challenge. So if he's going to go race where he can be an owner, which I don't blame him. If that's something that he really wants to do, that's probably the move he had to make. That he decided that was best for him. That's what he wanted. And like you said, I think it makes it more of an admirable decision to look at that and say, I'm stepping down on my racing equipment to do this owner thing.
And I think what's great too is he's stepping down on his terms, because a lot of drivers late in their career, and I don't want to say Brad is late in his career, but don't get that opportunity. I mean, I'm kind of drawing like a Cars type of reference a little bit. Like I hate to be doing that with Brad Keselowski, but a lot of drivers just don't get the chance to step down on their own terms. And two, something to also mention and note is the next generation is moving into the sport. We have a lot of new leaders, and obviously the guys that are running these teams now, like Hendrick, Gibbs, Penske, they're not going to be here someday. So we have to have guys moving into those roles. And for me personally, I think there's no one better out there in the field right now to move into the ownership role than Brad Keselowski. He is so well spoken. He speaks his mind in a respectful manner, and he has really good ideas to innovate the sport into the future. So I'm actually excited to see what he can do with Roush Fenway Racing, or the new name it's going to be called going into next season, because I think maybe not a championship caliber team, but I think he can really up what that team's able to do right now.
And I think going back to what you said in there, something that was really important was he's well-spoken. And if you go back to younger Brad, that was not him. He was not him. He was not well-spoken. He didn't know how to express himself in the right way. And you look at the interviews he does now compared to the interviews he's done 6, 7, 8 years ago, it's totally different. It's a totally different person. And I mean, he's gone through that learning role at Penske, and now he's transitioning that into something bigger.
And I think too, going off of your point, that is basically shows what Penske is all about. I mean, I don't want to say that Penske shaped Brad Keselowski, because Brad Keselowski shaped Brad Keselowski, but that just shows the great leadership behind Penske, Roger Penske, and what he's able to do at his shop. So that's Brad Keselowski. I'm going to miss him and the Penske side of things, but luckily he's not going anywhere in the sport. But going on to a darker topic, maybe a more controversial topic. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you who joined the Twitter space Sunday after the race that I hosted with my buddy Rob Tiangson. We had some really cool surprise guests. Mario Andretti actually made an appearance. I was a little starstruck there. Also, Pocono Raceway joined the chat later in when I was no longer hosting. We had to do some schoolwork. That's very important. And Rob took over the chat. So thank you so much to all of you who joined. Very exciting guests. Hoping to do more soon in the off season. But now time to go into the bad side of the news, maybe a little bit of the race in Martinsville. We had a lack of respect issue, Brandon. We talked about this last time you were on the show, so it's fitting it's coming up again, though I wish it wasn't. But in a Twitter post, I asked you all your thoughts on the race, and there were a lot of questions, a lot of good comments we'll get to. And RJ wanted to know our thoughts on the Denny Hamlin incident that happened post-race, also saying that Martinsville never disappoints, then saying about Denny's situation, me personally, this is so unprofessional and something needs to be done, end of quote. So let's break down Bowman versus Hamlin. If you don't know what happened, I'll smooth over the topic for you. Bowman won the race, but he did so sort of by spinning Denny Hamlin out, ended up having, that's why I hesitate on saying that, because I don't think he really did. I don't think it was purposeful, but ended up making Denny Hamlin finish 24th. Alex Bowman goes to do a burnout or a reverse victory lap, as he was saying in his post-race interview. And Denny Hamlin just kind of got into each other, did a head-on burnout is what I'm going to call it, though it definitely was not that. Our thoughts, Brandon. What did you think about first off, actually, let's start with the question. Was what Alex Bowman did purposeful?
No. I mean, I don't think it is. And I mean, you're going to have the old timers say it was. The Hendrick people are going to say it wasn't. The younger people are going to say it wasn't, because, I mean, you could tell after the race that people weren't too happy with Denny Hamlin. But I think it was a really good example of a young driver, eyes on the prize, racing for the win, maybe a little bit of stars in his eyes, but just getting down and overdriving the corner. And it happens all the time. That's what Martinsville is. You drive into the corner, 3 and 4, 1 and 2. Most of the time it's 3 and 4 because they're coming back to the line, and you overdrive the corner and you get into somebody. It happens. And yes, it's been purposeful before. Kyle Busch is a name that comes to mind that may have spun somebody out on purpose there before.
Even Denny Hamlin comes to mind too, with Chase Elliott.
Yeah. And so you can't, if you're Denny Hamlin, you can't say, oh, well, I don't race like that, because there's proof that you have, there's video proof that you have. I think it was unintentional, and I know I don't want to lead into the next question. So
go ahead.
I'm going to let you run the show here, but I don't think it was purposeful. I mean, there's going to be an argument from both sides. It's one of those cases where no one's going to be happy, and not everyone is going to be happy with the same answer. Not everyone's going to come to the same conclusion.
And I always say on the show, when we talk about issues like this, we don't know the truth. Only the guys in the driver's seat do. They only know what they know to be true. My opinion on it, I agree with you, Brandon. I don't think it was purposeful. I think it was kind of like a Chase Briscoe incident, again, with Denny Hamlin, where eyes were on the prize. You just want to win. You don't care about anyone else beside you. You just want to win the race. And for Alex Bowman, even though he has 4 wins this season, kind of had a lackluster year stats-wise besides those 4 wins, I think you want to win the race, So did he overdrive the corner? Yes. Was his intention to wreck out Denny Hamlin? In my opinion, no. But like you said, everybody's going to have a different narrative, a different truth of what they want to say. But now we're going to lead into the next question. Did Denny Hamlin, how did he handle it? My opinion, not professional. This was not a championship caliber kind of performance or a post race for Denny Hamlin. He said some things. He called Alex Bowman a hack. Even Joe Gibbs Racing on Instagram posted a picture of the damage on Hamlin's car saying like hack. And so everyone's getting in on this. And then obviously, as Hendrick Motorsports seems to have a trend of doing now, they made a t-shirt. Alex Bowman made a t-shirt of it saying hack on it with his little signature. So, I mean, it gets in views, it gets in entertainment, but Brandon, what are your thoughts?
I don't like the way he handled it. And I mean, I think you have to think about if this does happen and Denny Hamlin misses the playoffs, how much worse would the reaction have been? Because I know we talked about it right after it happened. I think it's a safety issue.
It is.
Bowman's pulling up. You don't know if he's got his helmet off. You don't know if he's got his Hans device off. You don't know where he's at in the car. And to pull up in front of him to go around and spin back around, and then to pull up head to him. And my favorite camera angle for the whole thing was the on car for Hamlin's car, because you can see Bowman with his hands up.
Yeah, just beside
pushing
himself.
his car backwards.
Yeah.
And I don't like the move at all. I think it was pretty classless. I think the interview was pretty classless too. But I mean, that's the kind of stuff we get at Martinsville every year. That goes back to an earlier point. But I don't think it was handled like a showman. If you see what I did there,
I see that.
if you see what I did there, but it could have been handled much better. And I think Hamlin's excuse, if there is one out there, if there's a counter argument, it's that this has happened to Denny Hamlin so many times this season that I would be upset too. And I mean, we can all say, well, I wouldn't have done that, but we wouldn't know unless we were actually in that situation. So I don't think it was handled the right way. But if there was a counter argument, it's that he's fed up because it's happened so many times this season, whether it was the Briscoe incident, whether it was another incident, whether it was this incident. It's just, he's not new to it. And I'm kind of interested to know what actually would have happened if he would have ended up missing the playoffs. Obviously, his first two races put him in a good enough position where he didn't really have to worry about it. Like, he was close, but I mean, he was still well to the good with everything else that was going on around him. So, but I think we could have seen a brawl right there at the start finish line.
Right. I think I actually was thinking that was going to happen. And obviously on the broadcast, they made it very clear that after that spin happened, Denny Hamlin was still going to be fine on points. But now we're going to dive into your thoughts as we go into our race ratings with your reaction, starting with Justin. He said that this race was long, but a good race. I enjoyed seeing side-by-side racing in the corners. I expected a little more shoving at the end by some to get into the finals. Can't wait to see what happens next week. I think he's a Chase Elliott fan because he then used the hashtag DI9. Finally, we have a comment from James. He said, it would have been nice to have all three auto manufacturers in the championship four, but the Chevrolet and Toyotas are just too fast. Hopefully next year it's a little more even playing field for everybody. I agree. A little bit of my opinions, but now it's time to rate this race above or below the yellow line. You all know how it works. 50% is on the line, meaning it was a race that we kind of didn't like, don't have an opinion of it. Below the yellow line obviously is not great. Above the yellow line is what we want. So Brandon, I'll start with you. What did you rate this race and why?
90%.
Wow, okay.
I really high, obviously. Last time I was here, the race before was like a 45. So
yeah,
a significant step up from Texas to here. But I thought it was a really good race. And I mean, the tempers flaring, the drama, the point battle going into the end, which we often do have when we get to Martinsville. I don't like Martinsville in some of the other series as a points advancement race because I think it's a little different across the three series, but I really like Martinsville being an advanced race in the Cup Series, and it adds to the suspense, it adds to the drama. You're going down to the last couple laps, +1, -1, -1, and it's so tight along that line, and I like it. It's such a story. It's a book that writes itself over the course of 500 laps. And it's just an awesome race to watch. It's an awesome race to watch post-race interviews.
Yes.
Whether they're positive or negative, like we just talked about. just the reactions from the drivers afterwards are so raw, and that just tells you like how much is going on during the course of the race, whether you're thinking about X, Y, and Z, whether you're thinking about, oh, you got into contact with somebody here, you had a speeding penalty here, but you passed 6 drivers on the restart here based upon the line you picked. There's just so many elements to this race that make it a complete race for the drivers. And I think just all the way through, whether it's the pre-race, the post-race, the race itself, all of it was exciting. So I mean, you have to give this race a high rating. So that's why I went with 90. I'm hoping this week we get even higher.
Obviously, Martinsville for me was the best decision ever by NASCAR as a race where they put it in the schedule right before the championship floor. You're going to see some heartbreak. You're also going to see a really exciting race to the finish. However, I don't want to say my rating does not reflect that because I really love this race. I did, but I think it was my fault for the rating I gave. I gave it a 75%, and I think I overhyped it. I was really expecting like a last year's race situation where it was Harvick trying to battle his way in and the heartbreaker at the end. So I think I overhyped it for myself, but there was exciting racing. Obviously, like Brandon said, post-race interviews were really exciting, really interesting to watch. But the first, I want to say 400 laps for me were a little lackluster. But then the last 100 laps, things really got going as we expected they would. But a 75% for me seems okay. Don't come at me in the comments. Respect the rating. That's all I have to say. But now that is with Martinsville. Let's go into some updates and hot takes from the world of NASCAR and beyond. We're going to focus on the Cup Series today, starting briefly with some silly season news about Brad Keselowski. Of course, the 2022 season. He's going to Roush Fenway Racing in the number 6. We don't know a lot about his team, but at least we can put a little bit more of the puzzle together. We now know that Matt McCall, who has been a full-time crew chief with Chip Ganassi Racing for the past many seasons, with Kurt Busch, is now going to be part of Brad Keselowski's team in 2022. I'm really not sure like how this came together. I didn't really expect this pairing. Brandon, I don't know what you think about this, but was there somebody else you expected to join Brad?
I don't know. I think it's a really interesting situation. I mean, Matt McCall and Kurt Busch obviously went out and got themselves a win this year. I mean, I would consider that a team with sort of lateral horsepower, machinery to Roush. Um, and I don't know. I think it's going to be really interesting. What do you get when you take a top tier driver, a championship winner in Brad Keselowski, you bump him down in equipment, but you have a solid pairing of a crew chief that also knows how to get the job done. And there's going to be two sides to this. It could be really good. Roush has gotten better in the last couple of years. I think if you go back to the race results from this past week and you look at Chris Buescher,
Yeah.
that's not something that's new. He's done pretty well all season. I don't know where he ended up in the points, just on the outside, but he put together some really good races this season. And then you had Ryan Newman, who put together some really good races this season on occasion. There's just no consistency there. So I'm
Right.
wondering if Brad will bring that veteran consistency to the team. And I think the worst that could happen is you have Brad Keselowski turn into a Ryan Newman, where he's really good at some tracks, but for the most part has faded into the distance. But I like the pairing. Like I said, it's someone that knows how to get the job done with the championship driver. So we'll see how they're able to work together. And who knows? There's crew chiefs that have been paired with drivers before that they can't get along, doesn't work, and they have to start over.
And I think something important to note, many important things to note in this episode, but there's some disadvantages to this, but also they can be looked at as positive. Of course, Brad is going into a team that he has little familiarity with, and he's also sticking with the same manufacturer, though. So there's a positive there with a negative. And then also the new crew chief with the next gen car. That adds a whole different twist to this scenario. But I'm also thinking he's in sort of the same situation as the rookies this year. Of course, Cindric is sticking with the Fords, moving up to the Penske's Cup side of things. He's in the Penske Xfinity equipment right now, but he's going to have to learn the Cup car. The setup inside is totally different. And then the next gen car, he's been able to test it, I believe once or twice. I think it was only once. So he at least knows some of how it drives. Brad Keselowski was able to test the next gen car, of course, but he's sticking in the same manufacturer. But he's going to have to learn everything new. He has to connect with his new crew chief. But I think if you're going to switch teams, I've said this before and I'll say it again. This is the best year to do it. Everyone is on an even playing field of having to learn these new cars. Everyone has to really adjust to how they speak about the cars as well. So them and their crew chief are going to really have to bond. So a challenge for Brad, but I don't think he's at a huge disadvantage just yet.
And I think another thing, when we talk just real quick about the next gen car, the last time we did this, who was the driver that struggled the most?
Mm-hmm.
7-time champion, Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah.
So he really struggled when they made that new transition. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what these guys do. Are we going to have a major driver that can't get adjusted to the new next gen car and struggles? I think it's going to be really exciting in that sense.
So we'll have to see. Of course, Brad spent 12 years at Penske, moving somewhere different, and we're going to have to watch him learn. We're going to have to watch all these drivers learn at next season. But speaking of something different, we're going to talk about now the Cup Series schedule for the final piece of updates and hot takes with the TV times. I'm just going to put it out there right now. There's things I'm not happy about, but we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna kind of break it down. So first key detail to note: NBCSN is no more in NASCAR. NBCSN will be discontinuing its network, and so now we're moving to USA for the NBCSN coverage races that they're supposed to be doing. Apparently, a lot more households have USA as a service on their TVs, so I think that's good. So there's a positive there. The second thing to note: next year's regular points paying races schedule. Here's how the math works out. We have 8 races starting at 4 p.m. or later. We have 21 races starting at 3 or 3:30, and then 7 races that start at 2 or 2:30. Obviously, a crazy amount of these races are starting at 3 to 3:30 Eastern time. Reminder, this is all in Eastern time. So first question to talk about, is a late start time better?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think the traditionalist is going to say that 1 o'clock should be the time because that's always how it used to be. But I get the late start. I get the 3:30 because then you're going at 12:30 on the West Coast. I think that's what it comes out to. I'm not 100% positive on my time zones right now. I'd have to look.
Me either. It's okay.
I think it comes out to like 12:30. I think some of the races, there's some questions. There's some questions I have. I mean, it obviously starts with the clash the first week at the Coliseum, which I don't think should be happening, quite frankly. I think that's a dumb idea. Blast me in the comments if I'm wrong. If it's a good idea, let me know so I can do my research fairly and give the Coliseum a chance. But I think it's a real stretch what they're doing. Looking down at the schedule, the dirt race at Bristol at 7 o'clock, not a fan.
Really?
I think it should be a day. I think that should be a day race.
Well, here's my opinion on it. So I thought it should be a day race too, but from my knowledge of dirt track racing and what I've heard Kyle likes to talk about, you need these races to be at night because with the sun and the heat, it's going to dry out the track. So track maintenance is going to be more. You got to really be on top of that. So with a night race, it kind of takes that down a little bit. So in my opinion, it's a good thing because it shows that NASCAR is at least trying to learn from the last time they were there.
And I think too, when we look at this season, that race was an absolute just disaster.
Yeah.
All the rain that week. I have to reel it in and keep it PG because I'm the guest here. But that race was a disaster. They had so much rain that week. So like I said, I'm not a fan, but I wasn't a fan of the first one because there was so much like we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what we're going to do. Like we have to bring in more dirt. And it's just like, what are we doing? So
yeah, they changed the rules mid-race too to make it single file like restarts as opposed to, and that for me, and we talked about this a long time ago when this race happened, but made the race illegitimate. That's words. They're hard. That's fine. But for me, changing the rules mid-race, they didn't clearly have enough knowledge. I think the cars, as low as they sat on the track, did not help. Of course, we saw overheating issues as dirt got caked up in the engines and in the bottom parts of the car. So for me, this will hopefully be a test if this works or not, in my opinion. If this dirt race doesn't go well, go to a dirt track. Go to Eldora. We love that track. Of course, I think it might be a little too small for these stock cars, but go to a track that can actually race dirt, my opinion. But moving back on track a little bit to more of these times, my opinion is I do not like later start times for me because middle of the day Sunday on the East Coast here, or like Eastern time zone in Ohio. I don't like when races are in the middle of the day because for me, it just kind of throws me off. I'm getting ready for the work week. I know a lot of people can probably agree on this. And having a race starting at 3, probably ending around 6 or 7, if we're talking like longer races in NASCAR, it throws me off a little bit. It kind of feels like I don't have a morning, I don't have a night, and I'm going into Monday writing a script, and it just feels crazy. So for selfish reasons, I don't like it. But I know in the past, NASCAR has tried earlier start times, and it hasn't really stuck. So we're going to have to see. And I know ratings are still going down. And so the TV stations, they have to try everything they can to get these ratings back. And I think the new car, new tracks next season, maybe it will work, but races with bad times, we kind of talked about it. You think that Bristol dirt race has a bad time. I want to mention another one for you. I'm a little bit shocked that the Daytona 500 is still set for an afternoon time. In my opinion, of course, if you move it earlier, the people on the West Coast, that's going to be way too early, but we run into rain issues every single year. We talk about running this race early to prevent these issues of having a race that goes until 12:30 the next morning, or 12:30 midnight, something like that. I don't know. But were you shocked to see that the Daytona 500 stayed at that time, or were you not?
Again, I think it should be a 1:00 race.
Mhm.
And that's what it is. In Florida, it rains every day. What time is it going to rain? Most often time, it's at sunset. It's going to rain right before the sun goes down. Then the sun's going to be down, and it's going to be dark for the night. But I think I'm glad you brought this up because I do think the later start time, excuse me, sets us up for more rain delays, rain cancelage till next morning. And if there's anything worse than a late race on Sunday, it's a race on Monday.
Yes.
And I think, especially for the tracks that do not have lights, which I think every track should have lights, different conversation. But I think just the tracks that don't have lights, especially if you have those later start times, you're setting yourself up for the possibility of a Monday race, which could also tie into something else that you just mentioned, declining viewership. Everyone's at work, declining attendance. Everyone's at work. Some things make sense. Some things don't make sense. Like the Coke 600 being at its normal time at 6:00 on a Sunday night on a holiday weekend. Perfect. It's always been that way, or at least since I can remember. Some of the older fans that watch this may correct me, as I'm still in my youth, as I like to say.
And I think too, another race that confuses me, there's 2. Nashville, I'm not sure why it's starting at 5. That confuses me a little bit just because it got such a good attendance at the time it started this season, and it was one of my favorite races to watch personally. I thought it was really fun. But I am glad at least that it's on the mothership NBC, not USA TV. I think it's going to be better perceived that way. And we also saw IndyCar went to Nashville, like on the street course. They did the Nashville street course, and that went really well too. So obviously Nashville is a hot market for motorsports, and I think it should stay that way. Another race that surprised me, and you can agree or disagree with this, but Road America on July 3rd. It's not a mainstream network. It's not necessarily the start time of that, but the fact that it's not on a mainstream network, I was a little shocked by that. Were you?
It's an interesting call. I want to know how everything's going to work. Obviously, Fox Sports 1 is almost the same. It's not the same because it's a different network, but at least you still have that Fox branding. I think with NBC and USA, they're 2 completely different things. And I'd have to check. NBC might own USA. I think there's obviously some relationship there, but I just want to know how that's going to work, because when you talk about Fox Sports 1 is Fox.
Yeah.
It's still Fox. When you think of NBC, you don't think of USA. So I think that's going to be something else that takes getting used to, because there will be your old school NASCAR fans that don't know that going into the season. I mean, the schedule's out there. You can find it online. Obviously, we're moving into a more online based society with streaming and all that. But there are going to be older fans that are going to turn on their TV on Sunday when we get to the NBC portion of the season, and they're going to go, where the heck is the race? But I think the really interesting one to me to continue on with that is Bristol, that night race in the playoff.
Yes.
I think that's interesting that it's not on NBC.
That one actually had me confused as well. I know The night races get a lot of attention. Bristol night races are super fun. Martinsville as a night race is also super fun. Also for me, the Martinsville night race was in the I wish it was in the playoffs as well. I just think that's more fun to watch, but we can have everything we want. But yeah, the timing on that one confused me a little bit. But talking about positives too, because a lot of negatives there, some positives, but for me, seeing that a lot of these playoff races, speaking of the playoffs and Martinsville's night race, wanting it to be in there, started at 2 or 2:30. So in my opinion, that's a good thing. It gives them more viewership during the playoffs, makes them a little bit more watchable for other people. Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, I think just going back to what you said, there's so many people that end up doing things later on Sunday evenings. People have family gatherings to get together, have dinner, do whatever, get ready for work the next day. I think by even moving it up an hour, I think that's something that works out. And I think we're kind of going through that right now. But who knows? As we move along in the season, races, especially on NBC, I feel personally that we get to the point where, hey, we're going to start at 2:30. Okay, it's 3 o'clock. Let's get it going. Or toward the end of the race, where we have to do a commercial with a caution for 18 laps before the end of the race. I mean, that's obviously a little bit of an exaggeration, but I'm still trying to get used to the NBC thing. I'm not a big fan, but who knows? After Fox gets a new analyst, depending on who it is, I might not be a Fox guy. I think we're obviously in a huge transition between what's going to happen at Fox. Obviously, you get Darrell Waltrip, he's now retired. You get Jeff Gordon, he goes to Hendrick Motorsports. So now you're left with Clint Boyer, and you need someone else. And it's going to be really interesting to see who that's going to be. I know that's one of the things that we are going to try to get into in the off season. Once we get done with the season, that's one of the things we're going to talk about relatively soon, because when we get done with the season in November, I mean, you look at 3 months, or 2.5, I think it is, until the season starts back up. So really short off season. So Fox is going to need to make a move pretty quickly as to who they're going to hire to fill that role.
I'm really excited to get into that discussion because I'm going to have to do some research. I have probably one good idea, and that's it. So, but yeah, we're going to discuss that during the off season because that's a discussion I'm really excited to have. But for now, I want to know your thoughts in the comments below about the TV schedule. What do you like? What do you not like? Leave it in the comments below. But for now, let's go to preview the championship race this weekend, starting with your track facts.
Your track facts for Phoenix Raceway: the track length is 1 mile long, the race length is 312 laps and miles long. Stage 1 is 90 laps, stage 2 is 115 laps, and the final stage is 122 laps. Now, something with this weekend. We have practice and qualifying back for the championship races, so there's no lineup to have right now, but let's get the schedule instead, starting with the Truck Series. All the events, practice, qualifying, and the race happen on Friday, 11 a.m. We have practice on Friday, qualifying happens at 5 p.m., and the race to crown the Camping World Truck Series champion will happen at 8 p.m. that night. For the Xfinity Series, we have practice on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. All of this is Eastern Time. Qualifying will then go to Saturday at 5:30 p.m., and also Saturday we will crown the Xfinity Series champion at 8:30. Finally, for the Cup Series, spanning across Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we have practice on Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. Qualifying goes to Saturday night at 7 p.m. And finally, we race on Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time to crown the Cup Series champion, the final race of the NASCAR season. Finally, let's end with driver stats, lining up the odds for this weekend at Phoenix Raceway. The last driver to win at this track, of course, was a playoff driver, Martin Truex Jr. in the spring. Next, the active driver with the most track wins is Kevin Harvick with 9, but if we look at our playoff drivers, Denny Hamlin has 2 wins. That is above the other playoff drivers at this track. The active driver with the best average finish is again Kevin Harvick with an 8.84 average finishing position, but of the playoff drivers, no surprise, is Denny Hamlin with an average finishing position of 10.78. The team with the most track wins, however, is not Joe Gibbs Racing. It's Hendrick Motorsports with 11 wins from what I counted. And finally, the manufacturer with the most wins, again, is Chevrolet with 25 wins.
So those were your track facts, driver stats. Of course, no lineup because we have practice and qualifying this week. But now let's dive into our championship board discussion across all series. But we're going to focus specifically on the Cup Series. Let's start by breaking down the possible outcomes. with some facts to start off with. Now, Joe Gibbs Racing is the only team to field a driver in the Championship 4 consistently since 2014. Pretty impressive there. And this is Denny Hamlin's third straight appearance in the Championship 4. Another fact that I want to bring up too is of the drivers of last year, the only two to reappear are obviously Elliott and Hamlin. So we have two new drivers in the mix for the 2021 championship season. To talk about, though, they have to overcome challenges. Obviously, this is Larson's to lose, but there's also some things he has to overcome. What challenges, Brandon, do you see going into the championship race?
I think, like you said, I think each driver has their own challenges. For Denny Hamlin, it's going to be his feud with Alex Bowman, if you can call it that. For Martin Truex Jr., it's going to be all the people saying, oh, well, he hasn't really had a great year. His car has underperformed. There's always going to be that speculation. As much as you want to say you're going to go out and win the race, as a driver, you're going to always have some speculation lingering in the back of your head about what could happen, what could go wrong. For Chase Elliott, I think his demon is that he's got to try to run as fast as the 5, like Kevin Harvick said a couple weeks ago. I mean, as bad of a comment as I think that was, it was true. It was true. He hasn't been as fast as the 5 this season, but nobody has. It doesn't matter whether you have the same equipment or different equipment. And for Kyle Larson, I think that's the problem. He has run so well all year long that something is bound to go wrong at some point. I don't want to be that guy. I mean, obviously I did it to Ryan Blaney, so I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't want to be the reason. I don't want to be the reason he doesn't do well. But I mean, I think every driver it's different for everybody, and who's going to overcome that? Who's going to be fastest? And I think we're going to see at the end of the race, championship 1, 2, maybe 3 and 4. I don't think it will come out all 4 in a row, but I definitely think 1 and 2 will end up being championship drivers. I know who I want them to be, but it's gonna be a wild weekend.
Anything can happen, and they also have to overcome their competitors. You mentioned with Denny Hamlin the feud with Alex Bowman at this point, but also I don't think this is still going to be a thing in the championship race. But we still have Kevin Harvick versus Chase Elliott. Will there be something there? At this point, it's so far removed. I don't think there will be, but you never know. They also have to face the non-playoff drivers. We've seen this as a constant issue in these past 2 weeks, worse than ever, like any season that I've ever watched as a fan, that they've just been in the way. And I don't want to use in the way because, like we talked about on our show 2 weeks ago, they're racing for something, but there's something you have to look out for. And also pit road mistakes. This makes me nervous for Chase Elliott because he's a great driver, but he makes a lot of mistakes that really affect the outcome of his races for worse or for worse. So having this be the championship race where he's going to have to try to outrun his teammate who has been so dominant all year, as you said, you have to be perfect. And for Chase Elliott, that makes me really scared. Last year, we mentioned as well, he had to start at the rear of the field at the Phoenix race. Yet again, though, he came back and he won it. So that makes me really nervous for that team. Something else that makes me nervous is, like I said, practice is back. And I think this is an advantage for Joe Gibbs Racing, but a disadvantage for Hendrick because they've been so good with just showing up to the track and racing really well right off the bat. Joe Gibbs Racing, we've seen them benefit when we've had practice on the weekends where we either go to a new track or we have a really big event in the Cup Series. So I think this will be a really good opportunity for Joe Gibbs to catch up and maybe catch up to the speed of Kyle Larson. What do you think?
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, Hendrick has done so well all season long. I think it is a disadvantage to say, hey, we're going to switch things up last race of the year. But I think the goal is maybe internally behind the scenes, the goal is to make it more competitive, which, I mean, obviously a more competitive race, everybody wins. I don't know how much I like that, but I'm not the shot caller.
Right.
So I just, as a Hendrick guy, I don't like it.
Right.
That's what I'm going to leave it with.
I mean, with qualifying too, they're not going to be starting as we've done these past many weeks with, COVID, where they just go based off of points, 1, 2, 3, 4. They might not be the top 4 drivers to start off this race in rows 1 and 2. I'm sure that one of them is going to get the pole, but I'm confident that they're not going to be starting in back in 15th. So we're going to have to see who can overcome that track position as well, depending on where they start. But to close out this a little bit before we get into our race winning and championship picks across all the series, We got to talk about our storylines here because I think looking at these stories is pretty interesting. We have Elliott, who's trying to defend his title. We have Larson trying to defend his dominant season. Like we said, it's his to lose. And if he loses it, not necessarily, I don't want to use the word embarrassing, but it's a big letdown for that team. We have Truex, the underdog, trying to take the title away from Kyle Larson, trying to upset everyone's season. And Hamlin, the most successful driver yet in the Cup Series, in my opinion, a Hall of Fame driver also for me, without a championship. A championship would solidify that. So a lot of really interesting storylines moving into this weekend that we'll definitely keep track of. But now it's time to go into our championship picks with the Truck and Xfinity Series. Now, I've been following these series much more closely this season. I've enjoyed the racing I've seen. The Truck Series, crazy races. Xfinity Series, gosh, it's always so fun. And of course, in the Xfinity Series, our championship 4 is Austin Cindric, AJ Allmendinger, Noah Gragson, and Daniel Hemrick. In trucks, we got Ben Rhodes, Matt Crafton, Zane Smith, and John Hunter Nemechek. Now, first off, just got to say this. I'm not in the business of jinxing people. But however, on Above the Yellow Line, all of us have an unfortunate history of jinxing people when it matters most. So we're going to give our race winning picks. We're going to cross our fingers or just do a little dance. We're not going to jinx anybody. We're not going to do that here. So starting off though, I want to give some poll results I had on Twitter about who you think will win the championship race for all these series. For the Truck Series, we had John Hunter Nemechek with 83.3% of you thinking that. For the Xfinity Series, AJ Allmendinger, the most dominant drivers in those series, I think AJ had a winning vote of 45.8%. Finally, for the Championship 4 for the Cup Series, we have you all thinking Kyle Larson with 53.8% winning. And then you also had a poll for Young Guns versus Veterans. We had the Young Guns winning. So Brandon, let's rewind the clock a little bit. Truck Series champion, who do you think is going to take the cake and why?
Statistically, all signs point to John Hunter Nemechek. He's just been so good in the trucks. I mean, he's Kyle Busch-esque. I don't want to say that because no one's raced like Kyle Busch has in the trucks. But he's been one of the most similar to that we've seen in a long time. Matt Crafton is scary. The amount of top 10 finishes that he's had in the Truck Series. And I think I was reading the statistic. The first one was October 20-something in the year 2000. That was the year I was born. The dude's still in the Truck Series. He's still in the Final Four. I mean, he's a guy that's been getting the job done for a long time. I'm gonna go the totally opposite direction against everything that I just said, and I'm gonna pick Zane Smith just because I want to.
Oh, just because you want to? No reason.
Just because I want to. I think if we're going with who has the best statistical odds, I would say John Hunter Nemechek, but I'm gonna homer Zane Smith for this one.
See, that's why I'm gonna go with John Hunter Nemechek because his stats back him up. Now, however, we know in the past stats have failed me. They always do, and when it matters most. But I feel like he does have some legit competition here with Crafton and Rhodes. They scare me. They will do what it takes to win. Rhodes, he will wreck you to win. Will we see that this weekend? I don't know. But I think Rhodes is also, I think he's going to be a competitor. I wouldn't count him out. This season, he started off strong. He won the first race of the season, and he got some really good finishes. So I think we're going to be in for a shock. Maybe not. But I think this is John Hunter's to lose. I will be disappointed if he does because he has put together one heck of a season. For the Xfinity Series, though, let's talk about it. I'll give mine first. It's a toss-up for me between Allmendinger and Cindric. But again, Hemrick has had bad luck this season, but good finishes. Gragson has had a tough season, but he was able to win the race last weekend at Martinsville when it mattered most to get him into the championship 4. So it's not going to be cut and dry for these guys at all. I think this one for me is going to be the biggest shock of who wins this championship 4 race. But for me, I think I have to choose Allmendinger again because of the stats. And also, I don't see him faltering under pressure like the other guys. What do you think?
And I think that's I think it's going to be a toss-up similar to what you just said. Allmendinger, he takes a lot of risks, and that's what worries me about him. What worries me about Gragson is he can't win 2 races in a row, right? I mean, it shouldn't be possible. So I mean, you have those 2 things lurking there. Cindric has been consistent, and what we talked about before the show, I've said I feel like Cindric's been consistent in the Xfinity Series forever, even though it's only been a couple of years. I think this one's going to be a real toss-up. I know you said you're going to go with AJ Allmendinger, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
I will pick somebody different just for fun, I'm going to go with hang on, let me flip my quarter. I would, I'm going to go with Austin Cindric.
Okay. Yeah, he would be my backup pick. If we were doing race winning picks and garage picks for these guys, he would be my garage pick. It's going to be between those two, but I also think Gragson, if he can pull together a race, I think he could potentially win, and not counting out Daniel Hemrick though. But at that point, we got to go into our race winning picks and championship picks for the Cup Series. This will be no surprise to anybody who we pick, because we've kind of publicized this throughout the video and also in our brackets who we think is going to win the whole thing. But let's start with our garage picks at least. So Brandon, who do you got in the garage for the Cup Series this weekend, and why?
My garage pick, and we've gotten to this late in the year where there's only 4 drivers in the championship. And I know I texted you about this during the middle of the week. I kind of feel bad that this is my garage pick because I don't think it should be. I think I'm cheating, but then I looked at everybody's garage picks from 2 weeks ago when I picked Eric Jones, and that did not go well at all.
No. No, unfortunately not.
So I'm going to go with William Byron, the guy that's been really consistent all year. The broadcast for NBC, they talked about it, how William Byron has ran so well the last 2 months and just somehow didn't make it to this point. I think it's wild. As a young driver, he's done really well. And when I look back to last year, I'm like, okay, who's this bum? Just how far we've come from when Byron started to now. And he's pieced together some really good races as we've gone further in the season. Hendrick has the equipment. He's got really fast teammates to learn from. He's been the fastest teammate before on any given week. And that's why I think he'll have a really good finish this week at Phoenix.
I don't think you're cheating with that pick. I really like it. And of course, because it's the championship weekend, I went with a championship for a driver for this one. This one might be a shock, though. I put Kyle Larson as my garage pick. Obviously, it's his championship to lose. I will say that 5,000 times over, but it's true. It's his championship race to lose, but I also don't really have him as my winning pick because I got to stick with my guns on this one. So I will give my race winning pick right now, my championship pick, because I've been so consistent with this. I had the bracket filled out. You've all seen it. I'm going with my guy wearing the shirt, Chase Elliott, because if I stray away from him now, I'm going to feel so bad. But I think he has a shot. Like I said, he came back from adversity last season at Phoenix and he was able to win it. Obviously, like we've said, he's got to face off with his opponent, with his teammate, Kyle Larson. So it won't be easy for either of these drivers to win the race, but I think I got to stick with my guy, Chase Elliott.
For the championship pick, I'm going the other way. I'm going Kyle Larson. And what I will say about this is I think the old format with Homestead at the end, if you're in that format, Larson 100%. He was so good at Homestead. Even when you had the championship for competing at Homestead, it was like, hey, that 42 car is riding 2 inches from the wall in second place. I mean, he was just always really good in those races. And I mean, we go back, and since this format has started, the championship winner has won the race every single time, but he was always the driver that was pushing them to the end. And I think that format would favor him, but I also think he's really good at Phoenix. Hendrick runs really well at Phoenix. Elliott's really good at Phoenix. And that's why I penciled them both down. I'm cheating this time, so I'm not going to cheat on the garage pick, but I will cheat on my race winning pick and my championship pick. And I would pick Kyle Larson to win the championship and the race. But I did the slash between Larson and Elliott because I wouldn't be upset if Elliott won either.
Right.
Those are my 2 favorite guys. And as a biased opinion, those are my 2 favorite drivers. But again, like we said, Kyle Larson has the stats to back himself up this year. Chase Elliott won the championship last year. They're 2 drivers that have proven over the past couple of years that they are tough to beat. They're going to be the top dogs of the sport for the next 10 years. One of those guys, I don't care which one it is. If I have to say I'm going to pick somebody, it's going to be Larson, but I just gave my reasoning for both.
Hendrick Motorsports guy in you says one of them. Just one of them.
Alex Bowman.
Alex Bowman wins. Championships are irrelevant. Those are our picks. Let's go and look at the other picks from the Above the O-Line crew. Adam in the garage has Denny Hamlin. Dom in the garage has Kyle Busch. And Zach has Martin Truex Jr. as their garage picks. Then the championship and win picks. Of course, you all already know this, but Adam chose Larson to win the championship, so he's sticking with Larson as his pick. Zachary Bell has Denny Hamlin winning the championship and winning the race. Dom, because he had William Byron as his championship winning pick, we had to choose somebody different. I think it wasn't a Dom, just to let you know, I didn't think that was too far-fetched. Byron was doing great until he wasn't this season, but he chose Denny Hamlin to win the championship and this race. And with that, those are our predictions. Let us know yours in the comments below. What are you looking forward to most this weekend? Let us know. And with that, we are done with this episode. Thank you all so much for watching Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk all about the NASCAR Cup Series. Brandon, thank you again so much for being on the show. It's been great having you. It always is. Of course, over the offseason, we'll have some more content coming with you and me. So stay tuned, everybody. But until then, where can we find you?
On Twitter, I gave my Twitter shout out the last time with the finger cannons for the employer, at the Brandon Loe. I'm not a super avid tweeter, but you can keep up with, like, I do a lot of live event broadcasting here at Bowling Green, Toledo, for high school sports and other college sports. So you can keep up with me on Twitter there, Instagram, the same thing. But yeah, catch me on the social media networks. I won't delete my account and disappear and run off to nowhere, but I will be there. So you guys can see me on the Twitter space. You can see me on the Instagram. Instagram, hit that follow button. I'll have to approve it because I'm still that weirdo that likes to have all my stuff private. But Twitter, you can just go in, follow right away. And if you ask me for more content, I will give you and you shall receive.
Everybody follow Brandon. Ask him for more content. Just do it. Make him do a little bit more work than he already does. Obviously, Brandon, you are so hardworking. I kid you not. Brandon is he runs RSO at our school, the radio sports organization. So Brandon, such a hard worker. Definitely, if you have more content to show for all of us on your Twitter page for NASCAR or any other sports, let us know and we'll plug it in the video. But for now, hearts. For more content from us at Above the Yellow Line, make sure you follow the Twitter page for fan questions, also Twitter Spaces. We have a lot of fun with those, and daily updates from the sport and beyond. Also follow Above the Yellow Line, our Instagram page, for behind the scenes photos and also updates about when we post to YouTube. Finally, check out the podium finish for driver interviews, recaps, previews, and more. All in the description below. But before you click on those links, guys, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share this with your friends and family. And thank you all so much for supporting Above the Yellow Line. And until next time, we'll see ya.